did what we said we were going to do. We've turned around the state of New York. We have made progress.
Governor Andrew Cuomo sounding off today about his 4 years in office and the road ahead at the Democratic State Convention on the island today. The governor leading his Republican challenger in the polls, but a new poll shows if a third party got into the race, it would certainly shake things up. And Republicans touting a victory after they squashed Tea Party candidates in primary races across the country. Has the Tea Party become obsolete? Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban apologizing to Trayvon Martin's family for comments he made on prejudice and bigotry. We'll play them for you, and we'll get the reaction from the table. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us this Thursday evening, May 22nd. Well, tonight we begin with politics of the New York variety. The New York State Democratic Convention ended today, the two-day event wrapping up on the island where Governor Andrew Cuomo once again accepted his party's nomination as he did 4 years earlier. The governor spoke out about issues like immigration, education, and pay equity.
You think this is success? Imagine when we have all our women working and real pay equity, not earning 77 cents to a man's dollar. Imagine when we have all our immigrants fully employed. Imagine when we fully educate every child of color to be the best that they can be. Imagine what this state is going to be then.
Now, the governor launched his bid for a second term with a progressive call to action, as well as backing from folks like Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York City, and also the former president, Bill Clinton. Cuomo's business-friendly policies have upset some of the progressives, however, and analysts say the mayor's support could help curb some of that criticism. Now, we talked about a poll yesterday. Let's break down the numbers. A new Q poll that came out on Wednesday shows the governor with a nearly 30-point lead over his Republican challenger, Rob Astorino. 57% of voters say that they'd vote for the governor, while only 28% they would say they'd back his opponent. However, and this is a key however here, if the Working Families Party decided that the governor wasn't, in effect, in line with their progressive platform here, and they went for their own candidate, that could be very bad news for the governor. This same poll showed it was threatening his share of the vote, which would drop to 37%. Astorino will go to 24%, and that unnamed third-party candidate will get 22% of the vote. All right, I want to bring in our panel here tonight. We are joined by Richard Brodsky, former New York Assemblyman with the Democratic Party, now a senior fellow at Demos and a professor at NYU. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Republican strategist Bill O'Reilly, who served as the aforementioned Mr. Astorino spokesman in his two successful runs for Westchester County Exec, and Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent, who was on Long Island here for the 2 days of this convention. All right, we'll get into some of the politics and the backroom stuff that was going on that I found fascinating the last couple of days. But let's talk about what the governor said and who his audiences were. Dominic, it really seemed to me, at least, that he was doing everything he could to try and convince the room that he was one of them and that he was a progressive through and through. But the polls show that he's still got some work to do. You know, that the left wing of the party, maybe they got nowhere else to go, but if they choose to go another else, it's going to be a problem for him.
Well, he does have some issues as it relates to, and Mr. Brodsky is the one to talk to that, but as it relates to the left of the party. But I think that as of right now, and a poll is only a snapshot in time, but as of right now, on this given day, I don't think he has absolutely anything to worry about. It may be a little cause for concern with the working families if they run somebody, you know, creeping over his shoulder, but I just don't see it. I don't see the Working Families Party pulling 22% of the vote on Election Day. I just don't see it.
Richard, you know, we kidded around last time that maybe you're the guy for the Working Families Party. You scoffed at the idea, but is it real, the level of discontentment among the progressive?
Yeah, and it's not, don't push it off to the left, because what you describe as the left is where the mainstream of the Democratic Party is. They're with Bill de Blasio. They're for a program that deals with income inequality. Right. They're not for repealing the bank tax and lowering the estate tax and the kind of economic policy that Andrew Cuomo has very carefully chosen. He's been a very strong progressive on social and identity issues, women's rights, gay marriage, guns. and it resonates with the party. On economic issues, he's a Tea Party austerity guy, really much to differ from with Rob Astorino. But when you see that poll, and you see 22%, not of the Democratic Party, but of the statewide electorate,
Yeah.
and he loses almost all of that. Rob Astorino loses 4 points. This election is over. Andrew Cuomo is going to be the next governor. Is he going to be the next governor with 43% of the vote or with 63% of the vote? That's between him and the Working Families Party.
And do you think, if you had to handicap it, do you think it's more or less likely that they actually do run somebody?
I think it's right down the middle. There are negotiations and discussions going on right now. The decision-making body is the Working Family State Committee. They are not controllable. They are not the stepchild of the affiliated unions or even of the party leadership. It's going to be interesting stuff for the next.
One last thing.
3
It's a
weeks.
little inside baseball, but Jay Jacobs, who used to be the state party chair, he took it upon himself to say, "Hey, I want this governor to not accept the independent party nomination as another pull here away from the governor trying to straddle both sides and play the middle." He's not the party chair anymore, I know that, but nonetheless.
The concern about the Independence Party is an integrity and political concern. The concern about the Working Families Party is an ideological concern. And you got to keep those things separate. The Republican Party itself has jettisoned or has been jettisoned by the Independence Party, but they still are joined at the hip to the Conservative Party. Working Families Party, if it runs a third party candidate, is going to have a major impact on the race.
And obviously, you'd like that if there was another candidate that got in there, because more of the votes would be pulled from certainly the governor than your guy. To that end, the governor didn't mention Rob Astorino by name, but as Andrew covered here today, he was talking social platforms throughout most of the address. I know there's no major surprises from the speech today, but what did you take away from it that's kind of a template for the campaign?
I think what Richard said, which is anything but the economy. He'll talk about anything but the economy. He'll talk identity politics, whatever it might be to rev up the crowd. When he talked about the economy, he was saying, imagine what it will be when. Not what it is now, because what it is now is dead last in the country. Well, that's the problem here. On the
He did tout some economic success earlier in the speech. I mean,
a little bit, but the Imagine clip we just saw. I was very interested to hear what Richard was saying about the Working Families Party, because he has much better insight than I do, certainly, on what's going to happen there. I don't think at the end of the day that the Working Families Party is going to split off. That's just my guess, and we can't bank on that. The number that I'm looking at when I see that poll is 7, as in the governor's at 57. Sure, it's a good number, but we need to get him down below 50. He started at 70, now he's at 57. If we can go 55, 53, 52, because the incumbent's going to get pretty much what he polls at. We need to get him under 50 by November.
I don't read too much into the Working Families Party number in that second poll, of the poll numbers.
Because it's not a candidate?
It's the perfect candidate, the one who doesn't have a name or an identity and is just left up to everybody's imagination. I mean, if it's a progressive superstar like, Bill Clinton or Richard Brodsky or somebody else, maybe they poll somewhere near that.
So he doesn't get 22, Andrew.
But
maybe it's 10.
Maybe it's 10%.
That keeps Cuomo under 50, which, if you have national aspirations, is a very difficult thing.
Well, and that's maybe the most salient point from my observation at the convention this week, because he picked Kathy Hochul as his lieutenant gubernatorial running mate, obviously to balance the ticket in terms of gender, but also upstate on some social issues and trying to play to both sides. They're trying to run up the score for Andrew Cuomo, much the same way that Chris Christie did
You mentioned
in New
something
Jersey
to me
last
today,
year.
guns, because it was instructive in both what we saw last week in Rybrook at the state Republican, that they believe SAFE Act is something they're going to get a lot of votes on, but also we heard it today where the governor feels that that's one of his signature issues and he's not going to run away from it.
Yeah, it's one of the two issues where the two parties were just completely 180 degrees apart from each other. The other one being the economic health of the state. But Republicans think they have a winner, or at least acted like they had a winner at their convention last week on repealing the SAFE Act. We heard from every Democrat at the podium this week that gun control is a victory ahead of the nation, did better than Washington did in terms of being able to get gun control, first in the country to respond after Newtown. They think it's a selling point for them. Both parties think they can score points on guns. Only one of them is going to be proven right.
And I know that Hochul, and nobody in the end really knows about Lieutenant Governor, except there were legitimate questions with what we saw with Spitzer, that all of a sudden Lieutenant Governor becomes governor. And does she have, doesn't have the resume to suggest that necessarily she's ready to step into the gig, but also what Andrew said, she's a pro-gun lawmaker from upstate, And again, if you want to keep poking the progressives, this is a good way to do it.
I hate to be so blunt, but if you really want to believe positions matter, go ask Gillibrand that question.
Fair enough.
So her positions now may not be her positions once she becomes lieutenant governor. If she becomes lieutenant governor, this is all about stopping the bleeding upstate. Her selection for Cuomo, his numbers upstate are not where he wants them to be. So they're hoping that she can stop some of the bleeding.
His numbers upstate aren't where they want to be if you want him to get 82% of the vote.
Which is what they want.
Well, and that's a fine aspiration. And his numbers are just fine, thank you, until the electorate is given a choice on the left, concerned about income inequality, concerned about investment. The Republican mantra now is to attack the economy. They may be right, they may be wrong. What they don't talk about is what their fix is. And their fix is more tax cuts for the wealthy. New York and the rest of the nation have rejected that. The era of Tea Party austerity is over. It's bad economics and it's bad politics.
I thought the pick of Hochul was a classic Andrew Cuomo move. I mean, it was really interesting in two regards. One, he spent so much energy talking about guns, and then he brings somebody on board that's 100% rated on the NRA. The other thing is that Kathy Hochul was instrumental in stopping driver's licenses for undocumented New Yorkers. She actually said to the Buffalo News, if undocumented people come here, I'll have them arrested. That can't help with the Working Families Party. It cannot.
And to the point that you introduced, Kathy Hochul's not ready to be governor on Election Day or on January 1st. Neither is Chris Moss. But then again, neither was Kim Godano in New Jersey.
Chris is ready.
Clearly, the lieutenant gubernatorial slot's trying to win the election and not for governor.
There's some fascinating backroom politics, and Andrew was there, as we said. It was not just the governor running for statewide office. You have the attorney general and the controller races. And I don't think anyone's going to confuse Eric Schneiderman and Tom DiNapoli with BFFs with this current governor. When we come back, we're going to talk about what is going on behind the scenes here. Also, David Patterson reemerged. We'll talk about that and much more after this.